Hello, and welcome to a special edition of Up Close on METV. I'm Charles Clapsaddle, Station Manager for Manatee Educational Television. And it's our great privilege to have with us today to talk about a very important issue. The Supervisor of Elections, Mike Bennett, and the Assistant Supervisor of Elections, Scott Farrington. Gentlemen, thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk about what I would consider a really critical thing for voters to know more about, and that's vote by mail. Last election cycle, there was an unprecedented voter turnout and voter response, and vote by mail was a big component of that turnout. First of all, Mr. Bennett, why do you think there was the response as it was?
You know, it's interesting. We pushed for the response. It came out better than I thought it was going to. And I really think that, in fact, as the numbers this time were the highest voter turnout in a non-presidential election than we could find in anywhere in the history of Manatee County. It really did fantastic. There were a couple of things that happened. Instead of having one early voting site, we had 4. Now we've got a 5th one lined up. We'll be announcing that probably within the next 10 days. But we do have a 5th one lined up. But the big thing was the push for vote by mail. We were able to get the Manatee County Utility Department to work with us. They mailed out in their utility bills, which everybody gets, a solicitation to vote by mail. We made it easy for all of our clients. They can vote by, register to vote by mail through the mail. They can go on the telephone. They can do it on the internet. That was really the big push. And what a lot of people don't realize that 83% of the people who requested an absentee ballot, 83% voted that ballot. It's the highest.
That's amazing.
It's just absolutely amazing.
And you know, to have somebody, have the community turn out with that kind of response just shows a tremendous support to wanting to get their vote in, and with 83%. What I'd like to do for those people who are unsure what vote by mail is, Scott, if you could you take us through what vote by mail is and how does a registered voter receive a ballot, and how important it is for them to get into the process to be able to receive that ballot, to be able to vote on time?
Well, vote by mail is really what it sounds like. It's the opportunity for a voter to vote by mail. They make the request with our office to receive a ballot. We mail it to them. They get it in their mailbox. They open it up. They look at it. They make their decision. And they put it into a return envelope and mail it back to us. Or they can drop it off in another manner. But we get it, we process it, and it's like they voted at the polls. I mean, one vote is as good as any other vote. And it's important that you get signed up to do this so that we can get the ballot to you as quickly as possible.
Right.
So that you can have the time to review it, you can have the time to make your decision, and you can have the time to get it back to us to make sure that it doesn't get lost in the mail, that kind of thing. So we want everybody to understand the process so that we can, get them through it and there won't be any hiccups in that process.
So as a registered voter, they'll get in touch with the Supervisor of Elections office and say, I'm Joe Smith, and I'd like to vote by mail, and I want my ballot sent to my address. Now, does that have to go to the address that they're registered to vote at? I mean, is there a process? What have they moved? How does all that work?
Well, to answer your question directly, no, it can go to any address you need it to go to. This whole thing started out as absentee voting with the whole principle that you weren't going to be home for whatever reason. And in our community, as you know, a lot of people move around a lot, and some people are here part of the year and not other parts of the year. So when you make the request, we're going to ask you, where are you going to be? One thing that is important to note is absentee ballots are not forwardable. So if we send it to an address and you're not there, you have a forwarding address on file with the post office. The post office isn't going to forward it on. They're going to return it right back to us. So it's one of the things that's important for the voter to know, and it's also one of the things we're going to ask. Where are you going to be when we send the ballot? If you're going to be up north, we'll send it there. If you're going to be down here, we'll send it to your address.
It's a very good point, because you have that population that's only here for a certain portion.
It's interesting. I think the biggest, if you would, hindrance to getting more people to register for vote by mail is they're still thinking absentee ballot.
Right.
They say, well, I'm going to be here, so I can't qualify.
Right.
Anybody can qualify. In fact, there's a big push now to even change the terminology and get rid of the word absentee ballot. The absentee ballot, as far as I'm concerned, is strictly military. Okay, those people who are serving Iraq and Afghanistan and the rest of it. But anybody in town, okay, we've always said you can kind of create your own polling place. Don't go down and stand in line, and don't go down and stand in the rain, okay? Don't worry about getting off work late, having to go in early. Request your ballot, you get it at home. And you know, and some people don't understand how important this is. 83% of the people return that. Less than 40% of the voters show up at the polls. But what happens is you and your wife are sitting there in the morning and you've got your absentee ballot, it's been on your desk for 2 weeks, you've had it in the mail,
Right.
and you and your wife are discussing it. And then you turn to your teenage children and they're asking, well, Daddy, what are you doing with that? Mama, why are you going to vote for that person? All of a sudden, we're getting the youth to understand how important is voting, because now Mom and Dad are discussing it at the breakfast table. So I think you get a better educated voter.
Well, and I would suggest, you know, based upon what you just said, Mr. Bennett, is that you have a little bit more time to be reflective in your ballot, you know, to really, you know, put some thought and some, you know, thinking into actually making a decision on that process. And you know, whether you go to, you know, the ballot box, you know, you're not being rushed there, but at the same time you have a reflective moment at home to look at your ballot in a very thorough manner. And I think that's a very positive attribute.
That's
to
a
have.
huge issue. And Scott was in the voting business. I certainly wasn't, but Scott was in the voting business when I believe, how many ballot initiatives did we have? 2012, wasn't that like?
I believe there was 18, if
18?
I remember correctly.
Okay, so people are trying to go down and read these when they're at the polling place. You don't have time to absorb them. But when you've got the complicated issues and you've got the ballot sitting at your house 30 days in advance, and you've got that time to study, you've got the time to Google it, you've got the time to talk to your friends and neighbors, I think you get a much better.
And I think, as you said, Mr. Bennett, you know, it's a way for people to have a discussion, open discussions about this candidate or this issue, and to really study what those candidates are putting forward. Let's talk a little bit about the mechanics of We Can. So if you request a ballot by mail, which I think is a great name, ballot by mail instead of absentee ballot. If you request a ballot by mail, obviously you're not going to be able to request that like the day before an election. So there's a window where people need to get their ballot. And what is that, Scott?
Well, you must make the request at least 6 days in advance of the election. And that's for us to have time to prepare it and mail it to you and make sure it gets to you. And then you have time to return it to us. So the request must be made 6 days out. But it can be made out as far as 4 years in advance.
Really?
We have what we refer to as all election requests. And that's what we encourage people to do is you put your request in, mark it or ask for an all election request, and that stays on file with our office through 2 general elections. So if you made this request today, it would go through 2016 election and 2018.
That's very impressive to know that. So once you're registered and make that request, you know that you're going to get a ballot at your address for the next 2 general elections.
Well, and not only that, if there's a municipal election or a special election gets called and you didn't even know it, you're going to get a ballot in the mail. We've had people call us before and say, I got this ballot, what's going on? They hadn't even heard about the election. So it's also a good way to get participation there, because some of the other elections don't get the attention that a presidential or a governor's election.
And I think that's really important too, for people to continue to be civic engaged in their community, to have that ballot, to be able to look at it and get those ballots from a variety of different elections that they may not participate in, you know, every year. Let's talk a little bit about returning your ballot. You get your ballot. You've reflected on it, you've discussed it, you're ready to mark it, but how do you get that ballot and what is the methodology? Obviously, you got to put a stamp on it and return it, but is there other ways for that ballot to get back to your offices?
We allow the people to drop it off at any of the early voting sites or our office. On the early voting sites, as long as the early voting site is open, and it will be open up to the Saturday prior to the Tuesday election. They can drop it off there. At our office, they can drop it off anytime because even after hours, we have a box that's extremely secure. There's a slider out there front. They can pull up to the front, walk over, drop the ballot. I don't care if it's midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. If they're going to bring it to the office, it must be in our hands. It's actually be in our hands at 7 o'clock the night of the election.
I see.
But
That's when your election office
That's when
is
the election
closed.
is closed, and when we call the time on the election at 7 o'clock, that ballot has to be inside the building. If it's inside the building, it gets counted. There's a lot of people say, well, how do I know my ballot's going to count? They can actually track it online. When they drop it in the mail, if they go online 2 or 3 days later, they can see that we received it. They can see that we might have had an issue with it. And we call them up and say, geez, you didn't sign it. Can you come on down? And we even let them do that. Then they can track it when it was opened, when it's processed. We can count that ballot, and they can know that their ballot has been counted.
I think that's a tremendous asset.
Well, people want to know, there's
Exactly.
something about dropping the piece of paper in a box. And, a lot of people my age, some of us that have got a few years on us now and a few wrinkles in our face, there was something about putting it in the box, okay? Well, I understand that, but I got to tell you, when I got elected to the supervisor elections, even I was shocked on how much detail and how much time and how much effort that the staff does at our supervisor's office. When Scott came on board, it really gave me an eye-opening experience to see the process we go through to ensure that every single ballot is counted, okay? And that's what we do. And so when they come in, they're processed. We know who sent them in, because they're all barcoded. We know that your ballot has got here, and we follow it by that barcode that's on there.
So somebody can go online to the supervisor of election, go to their, to the site that's specific, and say, look up their specific name and see whether their vote's already been counted, delivered, and counted, and is
Not
accounted
necessarily
for.
counted.
But
Processed.
processed.
Correct.
Okay. Well, that's a tremendous asset, and I must, reiterate a little bit about what you just said, Mr. Bennett, concerning the accuracy, the responsibility, and the attention to detail that the elections office places on each and every ballot. As you know, during the general election and during the primary, we kind of followed the two of you around for a while, and I was simply amazed at the level of detail-oriented accuracy that the elections office has. And it's just, it's an amazing thing. And I would invite everybody to see how their elections office works, because it's really an amazing process. But on the voting by mail, I think, as you pointed out, people want to know that their vote is counted.
Absolutely.
They want to know that it's been received, that it's ready to be tallied when that moment comes, and they can all be rest assured by going to your website and seeing that their vote has been received and is ready to be counted when the election is closed.
Something else, Charles, for those people who absolutely passionately want to drop it in the box, we encourage them, request an absentee ballot, request the vote by mail ballot. Take the time at home to go over the ballot, study the ballot, study the candidates and everything. Fill it out. Bring it down to one of the early voting sites at our office and put it in the box, okay? That way you really get the best of both worlds. You know you have voted it, you've put it in the box, but the best part about it is you had up to maybe 30 days in advance. Military people get 45 days in advance if they're overseas to really study that ballot. And it's just an amazing process.
And I think that that can work. Either you return it by mail, which is easy enough to do. You put it in your drop it in a mailbox, or put it in your mailbox and it gets delivered immediately to you. Or if you want that kind of other reassurance, you can always take it directly to the supervisor of election or to one of the early voting sites. But then the question, can anyone vote by mail? Is everybody eligible to vote by mail, Scott?
Every registered voter is eligible to vote by mail. It's and that's where we were talking about getting away from that term of absentee, because absentee ballots gives that connotation of I'm in the hospital, I'm up north, I'm on vacation, and you're absent. And that's why we're really pushing the terminology vote by mail, because it really is what it sounds like. You're getting your opportunity to vote by mail, and any person can do it. Any registered voter, starting in 2002 actually is when that changed.
So, and I think that's amazing, and you quoted the statistics at the beginning of the program, Mr. Bennett. I mean, that's a remarkable achievement, you know, to have that kind of turnout for voting by mail. But here's, and just throw a question to you. So somebody votes by mail, Scott, and they've done their ballot and they've sent it off, but they still show up at the precinct on election day. And, you know, I mean, that happens, you know, they get swept up in the election process and they want to, what does the precinct worker tell them at that time?
Well, if we've received their ballot back and we've marked it in our computer system that we sent you a ballot and that we received it back, and if this individual goes to the polls, we have what's called an electronic poll book, which if we get that ballot back within 5 minutes, that poll book has been updated with that information.
Within 5 minutes?
Within 5 minutes.
That's
Usually it's within 1 or 2, actually, but I'm going to say within 5 minutes.
That's amazing.
So
that's really amazing.
You show up at the polls, they look you up, and they say, "Oh, excuse me, sir, ma'am, sir, it shows that you've received an absentee ballot. Do you remember doing that?" And if they don't remember doing that, then we actually send them to the clerk. The clerk then contacts us. And we try and take a lot of the stress off the poll worker. And we talk to the voter directly, and we explain the situation. And if they absolutely insist it wasn't them, which it has happened, we let them vote what's called a provisional ballot.
Provisional ballot. And then you, during your review of all this, measure whether or not that person has already voted or has not voted, and you make a collective decision. Is that correct?
We don't. It's up to the
canvassing
canvassing board. The canvassing
Which is
board
another
is made
fascinating
up by
aspect.
the chairman of the county commission, the chief judge, and myself. If I'm not there, Scott is next deputy in line. If the chairman of the county commission, for one reason or another, can't come, he can appoint a deputy. The chief judge can appoint somebody, but the canvassing board would review that. Now, what sometimes will happen, and people say, "Well, I didn't mail it in." Okay. Fine, but we know that they requested it.
Right.
And we keep track in that electronic polling book of everybody who requested an absentee ballot. And if we show that it was mailed out, but we have not received it yet, then the canvassing board will determine, okay, 7 o'clock on election night, it never came back, because it could have got lost in the mail on the way out. Okay? Then we would count the provisional ballot that we allowed the person at the poll to talk. We just think it's important that everybody, you know, a lot of people think provisional ballot's a bad thing. It's actually a good thing because it protects.
Checks and balances.
Well, it protects you because if there was a mistake, we want to make sure that Charles Clapsaddle voted and his vote counted.
Well, and I would suggest to you that, you know, those incidents are, you know, anecdotal at best, because for the majority of people who do vote by mail, they're very cognizant of the fact, yes, I voted by mail. It was a great convenience for me, and I did this. I want to follow the election, but, you know, they're not looking to vote twice or anything of that nature. There might be some people who forget, but those are rather rare and few and far between, as opposed to the norm. But one of the things that I would like everyone to know about is how easy is it for voters to sign up by vote by mail? You know, I mean, can they just, you know, call you up and say, "I need from now on, I want all my ballots. I don't want to go to the polls anymore. I want all my ballots to come to my house"?
There's 3 basic ways you can sign up, and I would call them all very easy. The first one is pretty much exactly how you described it. You call our office, you say, "I want to vote by mail." We'll get a little information from you. We'll make sure we have your address correct. We'll make sure we know what elections, and we encourage everybody to I want all elections.
Right.
And you're done. That's it. The second way is you can send us an email or do it online, which sends us an email. You have to include your name, your address, and your date of birth. We have to have at least that information from you. And then again, if you have an address where you need it sent, other than where you're registered to vote, we need that. And then we'll sign you up. We'll send you an email confirming that you've been signed up. And then the last way is by mail. You can, as simple as taking a napkin, writing your name, your address, your date of birth, saying, "I want to vote by mail." Send that to us, and sign it. Send that to us, and we'll sign you out.
So, I mean, and then you in turn look at the registered voters, and then look at the addresses, and look at the things. And again, I must reiterate, the system of checks and balances that you have to match signatures and addresses and all of that is just very impressive. And the detail and the accuracy of what the elections office does is amazing. And I think you're to be really applauded for your efforts to ensure accuracy, completeness, and total responsibility for all the votes that come to you. But one of the things that I would like both of you to comment on is that you have, this is not a new initiative, but this is an emphasis on this initiative. But you have a lot of initiatives. There's I understand, a new ballot drop box at the supervisor's office. That's got to be, something important for you to have.
When we took the job over, as you know, I just recently got elected in 2012, and then Scott came aboard with me, and Scott actually brought the experience. I didn't have the experience other than managing people, but Scott had brought 10 years of experience with him. And so we started working with the staff. What could we do to increase it? How could we make it better? Even though the numbers of early voters has not drastically declined, we wanted to make it more convenient.
Sure.
So we expanded the number of early voting sites. We're going to add a 5th one this year. We're continuously monitoring those. Where are the turnouts? What are we doing? But the one thing that we knew is that the people who request an absentee ballot, a vote-by-mail ballot, will take the time to vote it. So we have constantly and continuously, and we will continue to push. Charles, there's 3 states that do 100% vote-by-mail. Washington, Oregon, and now Colorado. Now, Colorado, you can do it either way. It's kind of a hybrid, okay? But basically, everybody is expected in those 3 states to vote by mail. And they have not had the fraud issues that people think about. They've not had the issues of people voting multiple times or stealing their ballots. They've got a lot of checks and balances in place. And so I think that the trend in the future, you're going to see more vote by mail as we're encouraging people to take advantage of it. We know that they will take the time to study it. We just want to make it convenient for them. And some of the ideas that Scott has brought over, some of the ideas that Karen in our office has really worked on with the utility departments to getting those requests out there. And we're getting huge turnouts. We're going out to schools. We're signing up 16-year-old, kid in Florida, 16 years old, can sign up to vote. They can't vote, but they can register. And so now we're going out to the high schools and we're encouraging them. And because we're encouraging them to vote by mail and request that ballot. You don't know what's going to happen in the morning. You have every intention of going to the polling place tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock. But the boss calls and says, I need in at 5:30. Or you're going to go at the end of the day.
Right.
And guess what?
And you miss that opportunity.
He needs you to work late this afternoon, and so you don't get there. And so you're crashing in between. And you get out there's horrible weather and storm.
There's so many variables.
Vote by mail's work.
And I would agree with you wholeheartedly. There's too many variables on that election day. The window is so kind of close. But on a vote by mail initiative, that's that is the emphasis of this show, is that you have a wider window to make a decision. You're not narrowed to that, like 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., thing where, anything could happen. There's too many variables that could happen. And I do like the fact that you could still bring that ballot and drop it in the slot and still have that kind of effect that your ballot is there on time. So we're kind of winding down a little bit, and I want to kind of, give each one of you an opportunity. And Scott, and I have to echo, Mr. Bennett's thing is that the initiatives, the responsibilities, the accuracy, the detail that the supervisor of election brings to each and every election is phenomenal. I mean, I think everybody who has the opportunity should see the not only how intricate a process, but how precise it is. And you are to be congratulated for the level of effort that all of the people at the Supervisor of Elections brings under Mr. Bennett's leadership. What do you want this community to know about not only the convenience and the ease of voting by mail, but also about the reliability of it?
Well, first I want to thank you for those compliments. I can very honestly tell you that everyone in our office takes this job incredibly seriously. It's not, it's not something we take lightly. We want to make sure that everybody that is eligible to vote gets the opportunity to do so. And this we think is an easy way. It's a convenient way, and one that's been pretty well embraced by Manatee County. So we're excited that people are taking this opportunity. But one of the things that I wanted to mention is one of the myths, and I'm going to call it a myth, that I've heard a lot from voters is, well, you don't really count those ballots until the very end. I want to make sure my ballot gets in there first thing. And it's actually a pretty big myth, because those are the first ballots that do get counted.
That's right.
Those are the results that come out first.
Right.
And we take incredible care. The other thing that people don't think about is on election day, there's a 12-hour window. If there's a problem inside that 12 hours, no matter what it is, it's a tight window to get it fixed.
And to resolve it,
and to
whatever the
resolve
case
it.
may be.
Whether we have your address wrong
or your signature or whatever.
Whatever. If you choose to vote by mail, it gives you that advantage. And we do, I do encourage people to mail it a week at least before the election, because
Sure.
we are dealing with the post office. Sometimes there's delays. Very rare does it happen, but sometimes but if you mail it a week out, we have the opportunity, you have the opportunity to check with our office and say, hey, something happened, and or we can contact the voter.
You'll see that your vote is there. If they go online,
That's
they can
right.
see that it's there. And a week out is a reasonable thing, because they can request that ballot of a good ways out
Right.
to look at things. Finally, one quick question for you, Scott. The reliability of getting that vote and getting that vote counted, so important to people, because everybody wants their vote to count. So when that ballot is received at your site, or the supervisor of election site, what steps are taken to ensure that that ballot is counted and accounted for?
Sure. First, everything that comes into our office, the first thing we do with it, we timestamp it, so that we know when we received it, we can prove when we received it. And then every single one of those ballots, someone looks that voter up, makes sure that the signature that they put on that ballot matches the signature that we have on file, to make sure that it's really Charles. We don't want that type
Exactly.
So we take very good care to do that. If we have any discrepancies, like Mr. Bennett was talking about earlier, it's the canvassing board that
Correct.
makes that decision. And then from there, everything is secured in a secured facility.
Right.
And it's stored until about 15 days before the election. At that point, we have the opportunity. We have incredible checks and balances. We count everything like 3 times. The process that we use to open the ballot is very strict and controlled, to make sure that whatever you voted for, if I happen to know you, this is my friend, I wonder how he voted, it can't be done. The envelope is opened by one person. There's what's called a secrecy sleeve, in which your ballot is inside of. That's separated, so the envelope and the secrecy sleeve that's covering the ballot is separate. All of those are pulled out. And then all of the envelopes are taken off the table. These secrecy sleeves are given to the next person, so they have no way to match that back up, and then the ballots are separated. So the controls are there to make it secure, to make it secret still. I know that's a concern that I've heard. Some people are like, well, I can't tell what happens to it after that. I want to make sure it's secret. And then from there, they're counted to make sure if Precinct 101, we sent out 100 ballots, we got back 70, we have 70 ballots when we're done. So all of that is tracked. We have paperwork to track all of that, and then it goes through and it's tabulated in our tabulator. We make sure that the tabulator says we fed 70 ballots.
Exactly.
So all of that is done, and I actually encourage people, all of this is public.
Yeah.
People can come in like you did.
And it's an amazing feat. And and as you separate the envelopes from the sleeves, and when you start to tabulate, if there's one envelope missing, then you take steps to reconcile all of that. It's a remarkable process, and the level of expertise and the level of dedication that the Supervisor of Elections office has is remarkable. It really is. And you are dedicated to making sure that accuracy and that completeness suits everyone, and you're trying to make sure that all votes count. Scott, and great job in doing that.
Thank you.
But Mr. Bennett, I want to give you the last word here, if I may. I mean, this is a remarkable thing. You know, the percentage of people that in the last election did the vote by mail. I think we should start using vote by mail instead of absentee ballot.
Absolutely.
But the vote by mail is remarkable, a significant number of people. And, you know, we want to try to get that information out there, and we're going to put the website and the phone number for the elections office up. So if people want to find out additional information or how they can do it, you know, even this far out into the election cycle, you know, they can start doing it at this time. What do you see for like the future for vote by mail, and why do you think that, you know, citizens here in Manatee County should be embracing the vote by mail concept?
I think that they should be embracing it because they realize that when they've got, in some cases, 30 days to review that ballot, review the candidates, review the petition, and now we're seeing more and more strange stuff as far as constitutional provisions getting on the ballot. It's getting a little tougher to follow. We're getting candidates in there who have very, very diverse opinions, and you want to study who they are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as far as the accuracy, and this is interesting, I think you were there in the last county commission race we had here in Manatee County, where at the end of the night, when we had a recount, because what the candidate Charles Smith only won by 3 votes, as we were recounting them and we were actually physically counting each and every ballot, if you'll remember, we were 1 short. And our staff counted all 45,000 of them by hand one more time to make sure that we had every single ballot, that every single ballot was counted. That kind of dedication. Manatee County is so lucky. The previous supervisor, Bob Sweat, left me with an unbelievable team. I mean, we just have this fantastic team that they are dedicated to make sure that every vote in Manatee County not only is counted, but is counted accurately. That's what our job is.
And I think that's what the efforts of not only your staff, but, you know, the emphasis that you as the supervisor of election place on that. And both of you gentlemen are to be congratulated not only for the accuracy that you do. I mean, little or no mistakes is a wonderful. Not every county has that kind of record.
Manatee County does.
Manatee County does, and you should be very, very proud of that. Scott, last word. People want to find out about vote by mail. How can they do that?
Well, they can call our office or they can go online to our website. We have information in both locations.
We're going to put that information up on the screen so they can go to the website, they can go to the phone, or can they come down to the Supervisor of Elections office and find out a little bit more about it?
Absolutely. We're open Monday through Friday from 8:30 to 5 p.m.
All right. Scott Farrington, Supervisor of Election, Mike Bennett, thank you very much for doing this. I think it is a remarkable achievement that the emphasis on vote by mail is taking such a huge popularity here in Manatee County because it serves like a lot of people. There are seniors, there are people that can't get off work, there's people that, you know, have other commitments, young families, and perhaps on that one election day, you know, there are too many demands upon their time to do so. But vote by mail is certainly a convenient and efficient and accurate and responsible way to vote. Mr. Bennett, thank you.
Fantastic.
We're good, and we welcome you to come back at any time to perhaps talk about some of the other
We
initiatives.
want to thank METV for putting these things out. You all have been wonderful about all the work that you've pushed for Manatee County and all the voting, and we really do appreciate it, Charles.
Well, we thank you very much, Mr. Bennett, and Scott Farrington, thank you for joining us. And thank you for joining us on this very special edition of Up Close on METV. I'm just going to sit here quietly for a minute and do this.